Buddhists and the Zen people, for instance, have a very quiet method of meditation. They sit quietly and they simply allow not a blank to set in. The idea is not to make the mind a blank. The idea is to make the mind a gentle disciple, at the kneeling or seated at the foot of the reality within. The human becomes the chela of the divine, becomes the disciple of that which must always be the leader. And various ways these revelations come to people. Sometimes they may come in an occasional dream, which is a vision, or a real spiritual experience, which is comparatively rare. But all spiritual experiences must be doubted if the individual who has them has not conquered the common mistakes of himself. Anyone who believes an extrasensory experience, who is still incapable of the direct control of his own life constructively, must be afraid of imposture. And any organization that promises the individual that he can become great without becoming good is also a very dubious organization. There can be no rising upward into the higher levels of consciousness except through a kind of meditative discipline. And what is meditation in this case? It is not sitting in a corner somewhere with your eyes closed and your fists clenched tightly. Meditation in this case is the quiet recognition, realization of the values of life as they have been presented to us in daily experience. Meditation helps to bring us a new way of being useful, a new way of solving or helping to solve problems around us. Now we can say with all meditation practices that nobody can solve anybody else's problems. This is true. Therefore, the fact that we think we are solving them is not quite really true. The part that is beneficial to us is the fact that we have given up something of ourselves because we love someone else more. This is the great gift. And the great gift in turn going to them may give them the courage to see what we have done and do it for themselves. Every individual who becomes happy must make himself happy. There is no possible way of other people making anyone really happy. And any apparent happiness that arises without the control and direction of inner faculties is going to come on the rocks one of these days and be seriously shipwrecked. All these things are part of a large plan, a large purpose, a divine way of things. And in our quietude, in the small voice, the voice of the silence will speak. And the voice will be like the voice of God in Boehmes' vision. It will be a small, quiet voice, never a thundering of power, never a vast expression of some determination, never a final order descending from on high, but it will be the quiet voice of a gentle person telling us something we ought to know, and telling it as though we were beloved children, and not because we were great people. The recognition of these experiences comes often in various small ways. I know, for instance, one case in which an individual was very fond of a garden. They loved to plant flowers and things of that nature, and they always loved flowers. It was a very kindly relationship. It was a beautiful, quiet relationship, and one day this person, while looking at one of the flowers that was particularly beautiful, had something happen. Suddenly, this flower seemed to speak. It didn't say anything, but it seemed to speak, and suddenly the law of that flower burst into the mind of this very kindly gardener. The law of the flower became a symbol of the whole unfolding of the cosmos. The flower became an infinite symbol of an infinite purpose. And it is. It is a part of a great and infinite purpose. But most of those who look at the flower don't see it that way. But this person saw it that way. Saw the flower as suddenly bursting forth into a perfect symbolism of the universe. It was there all the time, but at that moment, the reality in the individual picked it up and brought it out. The message came from something beyond the mind, something beyond the emotions, but an infinite impression of reality, which meant that the person had for a moment's contact with one of these levels of higher insight. Plotinus, the Neoplatonist, said that in his lifetime, that only on 2 occasions had he been lifted up into the presence of reality, and that for only a few seconds. But that became the most powerful experience of life, and all of life from then on was never the same as it had been before. The same might be said true of Luther Burbank with his love of flowers and plants. Here's a man who was able, very obviously, to influence flowers and plants. I saw him one afternoon and we talked about these things, and he said that he could talk with the plants, and the plants answered him. And when he said he wanted them to do something, they did it. So several big universities sent classes and students and so forth to see how Mr. Burbank was taking the spines off of cactus so they could be used in the desert to feed cattle. And they did exactly what he did and got nowhere. And he explained that the reason they didn't get the result was because they hadn't talked to the flowers and plants. They hadn't told those plants what he wanted them to do, what they should do, and how they could help by doing it. But if you talk with them and understand them, even in silence, you commune with them, not as little things with a root, but as reality, and wound up in a magnificent little mystery, that they obey. And he told me, he said, the only person I ever had that was able to do it was an old Chinese gardener. He said, this gardener watched me and listened, and from that time on he always talked to the plants, and they did what he wanted them to also. He said, you've got to understand life. Life is not you and nothing, or you and something that doesn't mean anything. And all the flowers and birds and animals and creatures of the universe are real. And to each level of man's thinking, some form of life becomes immediately instructive. And by accepting the instruction, a great new dimension of consciousness is achieved. This is the only way reality can be proven. It can't be proven in laboratories. It can't be proven in anything except all of nature. The very planet and everything that is on it bears absolute and eternal witness to reality. But the reality is not obvious to the person who doesn't know what the term means, or doesn't know what the experience of it means. To us, humanity is a unique thing, other things are different. We're now beginning to take a little interest in animal life, but at the same time, we haven't found the realities in these things. We haven't found that by looking at the most simple living thing, that we come face to face with a truth, a reality, an inevitable, which we can never influence, but which we can learn to accept and obey. So this is what really opening the door is. This is why the Indian went out and did vigil. He did vigil because he knew that the air was filled with life. He knew that everything that existed was real. Now he couldn't come back and explain all this to his fellow tribesmen, although most of them probably were sympathetic to it. But the proof of the fact was something else. The proof was that when he went out as a healer and sat and did vigil, the great ones, the true ones, sent symbols to him so that he would know what to do. And the fall, when he was up here with me, he said that a little light appeared somewhere on the earth around him, around a little plant, or a little flower, or a weed, or even some little small animal or creature. And he knew instantly that that which the light was around was the thing that was necessary to heal the sick man for whom he was praying. So he took this material, usually an herb, which he had never used before. He had no botanical knowledge, but he had seen in a meditation that this was it. And he took it and he made a tea with it and he gave it to the sick man. Then the reality proved itself. The man got well. That was the only reality that could be demonstrated. All the others could be, it may be a mistake, but if the man got well by a mystical experience, then that experience was real. And it's the same all the way along. We cannot get the positive demonstrations that we seek of all these things. The only thing we know is that the closer we can come to reality, the closer we come to peace, happiness, and health. And the further we get from reality, the more rapidly our problems multiply. Now, for those of us who are just, kind of going along on the way and haven't got too far, there are things we can do ourselves each day. We can begin to quiet the prominent causes of confusion. There is no meditation based upon some esoteric exercise that can ever work if the individual has not accomplished a transformation within himself. This was the highest phase of alchemy. Alchemy was to make gold out of base metals, and spiritual alchemy was to discover the eternal gold of reality in all things, which can be released and brought into manifestation by art. And art in this case is the beauty, it is the skill, it is the wonder by which we do what is right because it is right. This type of thing is something that has come down to us for a long, long time, and it will continue to come down to us until we obey it. We must find the only answer that there is, and that is the utopian answer, that the human being must live the fullness of humanity, of his own endowment. He must manifest all the manifestations of the condition of the level of life upon which he exists. And having done this, he may then request very quietly, or may not even have to request, because realities perpetuate themselves. We expect to go on to the next level of understanding and insight. We are held behind by the ballast of our own mistakes. And until we are able to master those and redeem them or restore the integrities in them, we will remain in trouble. Experience, which is comparatively rare. But all spiritual experiences must be doubted if the individual who has them has not conquered the common mistakes of himself. Anyone who believes an extrasensory experience, who is still incapable of the direct control of his own life at the foot of the reality within. The human becomes the chela of the divine, becomes the disciple of that which must always be the leader. And various ways these revelations come to people. Sometimes they may come in an occasional dream, which is a vision or a real spiritual constructively. Must be afraid of imposture. And any organization that promises the individual that he can become great without becoming good is also a very dubious organization. There can be no rising upward into the higher levels of consciousness except through a kind of meditative discipline. And what is meditation in this case? It is not sitting in a corner somewhere with your eyes closed and your fists clenched tightly. Meditation in this case is the quiet recognition. Buddhists and the Zen people, for instance, have a very quiet method of meditation. They sit quietly and they simply allow not a blank to set in. The idea is not to make the mind a blank. The idea is to make the mind a gentle disciple, at the kneeling or seated.